But also be informed we want to read the report which has just been tabled, a report of JLAC, to see what their thinking is. And I hope that at the end of the day, then we are going to fast track this bill. If there is a bill, Mr. Speaker, that we need to have passed like last year, it's actually this bill, Mr. Speaker. For the simple reason as properly captured by the majority leader. We have people in this country who are not represented in parliament because the IBC is not properly constituted. If we can finish with this bill and properly constitute IBC, then we can carry out elections in Vanessa and in those wards where there are vacancies for representatives of the people. Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, I support.
Next is Senator Muma Muyeka. You know, Senator Muma, your first name is almost a one that has been used the last 2 weeks. Catherine.
I don't know whether I can tell Chair to be in order.
I'm sorry. Your name at some point. Proceed and use your minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the Chair, JLAC, to just quickly read out the amendments that JLAC has proposed to this bill.
Senator Kadri Numa.
Yes.
Honorable Senators, you know when the Chair is here and he gives Senators to make or to debate, it is out of so many things that I've given a member, even from this side. I can give even 3 from this side. So when I give Senator Enoch and Senator Catherine from my left, what is the problem with that? You can sit in any side of the house. So nobody should direct the speaker. And I'm a very sober guy who eats mirror and everything, so I'm very alert. Proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, for that. This personalizing of issues is not very good. Mr. Chair, Honorable Chair, Honorable Speaker, sorry with all the confusion. Honorable Speaker, I rise on behalf of the Chair of JLAC to present the amendments proposed by JLAC so that as members debate, they might want to also contextualize that. And Honorable Speaker, I might request that the Secretariat just print out, it's a one-pager of the JLAC, extract the JLAC proposed amendments from the report and share with the members so that members can contextualize as they speak. So I'll straight away go to the amendments. Mr. Speaker, the JLAC has largely accepted the IBC amendment bill as is, but has proposed some further amendments to actually improve that bill for the sake of the Senate, largely. At clause 2, we have proposed that in paragraph A, which describes parliamentary party as that, where is it? Which describes a parliamentary party or coalition parties to mean consisting of not less than 5% of membership of the National Assembly. We have proposed that we add the words "and Senate," so that we are speaking about the National Assembly and the Senate. That is the proposal that we have inserted in the proposed clause 2 amendment. We have then further added another clause, G, that will again indicate that whenever there is an expression of a parliamentary committee, that this should not just refer to the National Assembly, but it should refer to both the National Assembly and the Senate. Honorable Speaker, in clause 3, the JLAC has proposed that clause 3 be deleted and be substituted with the following clause. So that we provide that those who are being appointed as commissioners must have 10 years experience. We think the JLAC feels that that is a very important commission, and we should provide a higher bar in terms of experience of commissioners. So the JLAC members proposed that this be increased to an experience of 10 years. And then we have actually carried the day in terms of the proposed inclusion of qualifications on information, communication, and technology, and those on accounting. In clause 7, Mr. Speaker, in the new proposed clause 24B, we have proposed to insert the words of each House of Parliament immediately after the word parliamentary committee. Again, this is to ensure that the continued interpretation of Parliament to mean National Assembly is corrected so that both Senate and National Assembly are included in that definition. And again, in subclause 2 of section 6, we are again proposing that at the end of the words National Assembly, we add the word the relevant, we substitute that with the words the relevant House of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, in B, we are proposing in paragraph 7 of the new proposed 24B to delete the words National Assembly appearing in the beginning of the paragraph and substitute that with the words each House of Parliament. In C, in paragraph 8 of the new proposed section 24B, we have proposed the inserting of the word and the Senate immediately after the word National Assembly. And finally, in paragraph 9 of the new proposed 24B, by inserting the word Senate immediately after the word National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, these are amendments that will actually bring on board. They were not considered by Nadco, but they are absolutely important for the Senate to be taken.
Chalge?
Mr. Speaker, with your indulgence, I was wondering in the rules of debate, I thought we are still at the second reading, not in the committee of the whole. Although I appreciate what Senator Muma is doing, are we in third committee stage, or are we in second reading? Because the rules of debate is that you engage, you give us merits and demerits, not giving us the amendments that the committee proposed. Is it in order, Mr. Speaker, as per the rules of debate and vis-a-vis the rules of the committee stage?
Maybe you refer to your standing orders and then you come back to me. Refer the standing orders where that matter is addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said clearly, it was our intention to just share what we've put so that you take it into account. Because if you focus on that, just the clauses that were brought by Nadco, you will miss on the very many others that we have brought on board, which actually made Senate not to be an equal house.
To me, Senator
thank you
Muma,
very much.
you are enriching debate, actually. You are enriching debate. That is the other one we can use.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I wish to stop there so that others can have a chance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Now you can proceed to the other duty that you have. Senator Mbua.
So Senator Muma has done a very good.
It for a minute.
Yeah, you have a minute.
Sit for a minute. Okay.
What is the problem with you people? I just ignore you. Mr. Speaker, so Senator Muma, as you have rightly ruled, has enriched debate and then introduced the provisions of the jailer committee to the bill that we are debating. In which case, then, are we doing that reading in second reading? Senator Cheragay, you read your standing orders. I'm on a point of order. Standing orders. I'm on a point of order. How can you be another point of order? So you mean you can rise on a point of order on a point of clarification? People think.
Senator Wambua.
People think.
Senator Mbua, stop engaging other members. Okay. Stop engaging them. What is your point of order, Senator Chelagay?
Mr. Speaker, you know this house is a house of rules. Understanding order number 97. Senator Wambua had contributed to this matter. So even the standing orders ourselves should guide us. Why would he want to speak to the same matter? Mr. Speaker, the standing order. Mr. Speaker, speaking twice. Debating. Mr. Speaker, can you kindly listen to me? Understanding order 97. No senator shall speak more than once to a question except in the committee of the whole. Senator Wambua should have waited until we are in the committee of the whole, Mr. Speaker.
He was seeking clarification.
No, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't happen. It says you cannot in this standing order 97.
Standing order number 1 to give him that opportunity. Also, I thought the House can benefit from whatever clarification.
But you can introduce in the committee of the whole, Mr. Speaker.
And also the chair is not here to ngagi members.
No.
That is not one of my duties.
But why is it?
Senator Roba, you know, let us hear what you have, because you are also today making some noise. Let us hear what you have in your mind.
Thank you, Speaker.
It is corresponding to what you have done this morning.
Thank you, Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute. My personality is that I must speak up. It's not noise. Mr. Speaker, as I support this bill, Mr. Speaker, I would like to add my voice on particular matters, starting with the delimitation of electoral units, Mr. Speaker. You can see there that the Commission says, the bill says that the Commission shall discharge its mandate of the delimitation of boundaries. And it's talking about electoral units, Mr. Speaker. But if you go further and see what they are outlining, you will notice that, first of all, an electoral unit is either a ward, a constituency, or a county. All of these units are within devolution, Mr. Speaker. And yet, when you look at how they are outlining the responsibility and what is happening in that section, you will note that the same is limited to National Assembly, Mr. Speaker. You can reference the part where they say that the parliamentary committee shall within 14 days of receipt revise preliminary report and table the report. That parliamentary committee doesn't specify whether it will be limited to the National Assembly or to the National Assembly and the Senate. The next point, they say the National Assembly shall within 14 days of tabling the revised preliminary report. So again, they are referencing the National Assembly. On the next point, again, you will see that it's about the National Assembly. So even on the role of the delimitation of boundaries, which actually is a core function of devolution, because you have the wards there, you have the constituencies, and you have the counties, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker. And you know that Senate as the upper house is there to protect the devolution, Mr. Speaker, yet we have absolutely no role based on this bill that has been proposed. We have no role, we have no particular influence in this structure that is being proposed. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, so that you understand, Madam Speaker, so that you understand the seriousness of this matter is that on all boundary disputes that we are experiencing now, I will give an example of the boundary dispute that we have between Nyamira County and Kisii in Keroka, Madam Speaker. If we have no influence as the Senate to make sure that we are protecting devolution, you'll find that some of the decisions that will be taken here based on the numbers that we have in the National Assembly will mean that, for instance, Keroka can move suddenly to Nyamira from Kisii County, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker. And yet, at the end of the day, the Senate has got no role to play in this particular proposal that is being put here. Madam Speaker. So I would like that to be noted, because if this bill is passed as it is, the Senate then becomes redundant in matters of delimitation of boundaries, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, another issue on this particular matter on delimitation of boundaries is that you notice that it is centrally squared in the National Assembly. Yet, if you are going to increase the number of wards, or decrease the number of wards, or increase the number of constituencies, Madam Speaker, the first beneficiary or the first loser of that particular action is a member of parliament from the National Assembly. Meaning, you are actually allowing the judge of the outcome of a situation where they are either a loser or a beneficiary to be someone who's already partisan. An example that I can give you, we have been trying I come from Bobasi constituency where I reside, Madam Speaker, and our constituency is very, very huge, Madam Speaker. We have 8 wards. In those 8 wards, if you look at the issues that we have to deal with our constituency, a neighboring constituency like Bonchari constituency, Madam Speaker, even in terms of resources, it doesn't make economic sense. But if that bill is taken to the National Assembly, where my sitting member of parliament of Bobasi constituency is seated, outrightly based on clan issues and re-election issues, he is going to completely vote against having 2 constituencies in Bobasi, Madam Speaker. Yet that is the person who we are now entrusting squarely in terms of delimitation of boundaries. So, in that aspect, I even think that if we are going to talk about increase of wards or constituencies or even counties, Madam Speaker, in fact, that should be a role that should either be completely independent from both houses, both the Senate and the National Assembly, in a way that it is only IEBC, based on the metrics and the statistics that they have, that they decide what is there. Or if you are going to involve either of the houses, it has to be both houses voting for or against it, because it will be both houses benefiting or losing. And by that I say, as a politician who gets CDF based on the number of wards that they have, if they are told now, we are reducing your number of wards, they are not going to vote for that thing. So this is something that we really haven't thought through, and my proposal would be to have both houses completely not part of the delimitation of boundaries in terms of the decision of whether to increase or reduce, or to have both houses come on board to vote for the same or to participate in the same, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I also want to weigh in terms of what we have on the composition of the commission, Madam Speaker. And it might sound cliche that every time I stand, I will be standing on the issue of gender parity, on the issue of women representation. But Madam Speaker, I'm specially elected to actually do this job of ensuring that women and girls are represented in all spaces. On the issue of the composition of the commission, Madam Speaker, there is a clear process and outlining of who, in terms of skill set, of who, in terms of the background. Now we are talking about bringing accountants on board, adding more ICT specialists on board. But somehow, and this is the strange part, because this bill is actually one of the bills under Nadco, which was a national dialogue that is supposed to include women, because women will form more than 51% of this population. Yet, when you look at all the proposals that I see here, there is no attempt on engaging the gender parity. As a matter of fact, so that senators in the House might not think I'm just speaking passionately out of nowhere. When Senator Wambua was saying we need to get off our phones, Madam Speaker, some of us, when we're on our phones here, we are researching and ensuring that the points that we are speaking are actually factual, so that you don't stand on a point of order 105 on factual points. Madam Speaker, if you look at the commission for Samuel Kivuite, if you look at the members and don't look at anything, don't look at the skill set, don't look at the ethnical background, just look at gender parity, Madam Speaker. You will see that we had Mr. Bashir, Mr. Elifelet, Mr. Henry, Mr. Edward, Mr. Frank, Mr. Nathaniel, and then we had Wangui, the lady, one, Madam Speaker. That is Kivuiti's commission, the members that were there, Madam Speaker. You know, so that, you know, I like speaking from data. If you look at how we have actually progressed in terms of representation of women in politics, in active politics, Madam Speaker, from 2003, we have had 7.14% of women elected to Parliament, to the Parliament of Kenya. That has gradually increased to 2022, where we are talking about 23.4%, Madam Speaker. Then I was looking at the commission to see if there's any influence or anything. Madam Speaker, the latest IEBC commissioners, if you go and look at the members, you'll find that at least then we had 2 women out of the total commissioners that are there. So if we are having now an opportunity to dictate who becomes a commissioner, where they come from, whether a religious background, a political institution, or what, why are we not being intentional in terms of ensuring that at least our 2/3 gender threshold is met? There is nowhere in this proposal where it says that out of all of these members, at least 2/3 should be of one gender, Madam Speaker. I believe that is something that needs to be looked into, because I've given you the data, I've given you the statistics, again, coming from a proposal that had a special bipartisan committee from both sides of the divide, and both sides of the divide did not even think about women. Those people who are in that particular committee, Madam Speaker. I'm very disappointed in that essence about this particular issue that is there, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, finally, I want to say this, that in every single bill that comes to the House, this House, the upper house, the Senate, Madam Speaker, we need to be careful with how we are engaging these bills. Because sometimes, and I have said this before, we are pushing the agenda of the National Assembly. And when I look at all the references made in this bill, we are actually proposing that the National Assembly takes charge in terms of
Senator
all
Gloria,
the procedures.
Would you wish to be informed by Senator Wakoli?
Yes, I'll be informed.
Asante. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to bring it to the attention of my good senator that as they have been constituting this, I think it is in page 309, the last 2C, in nominating the persons, subparagraph 2A, B, and E, the respective nominating bodies shall ensure that no more than 2/3 of the nominees are of the same gender. The breakdown of the persons to be nominated. Yes, so I think you are in spirit and you are fighting a good cause. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. And that is why I agreed to be informed by you, because I know you always have proper information. Madam Speaker, as I conclude, I want to say that, Madam Speaker, the Nadco committee, as I congratulate them for the proposed bills that we are going to see, because there are several of them, Madam Speaker, I have to speak and say that it was very unfortunate that the issue of the 2/3 gender was actually excluded from the Nadco report. And Madam Speaker, we know that as much as we tried to mitigate and find a way to ensure that we finally deal with the two-third gender rule, Madam Speaker, we know that both houses, the National Assembly and the Senate, are guided by standing orders. There was an assumption that by having a sit-down with both the Speaker of the National Assembly and the Speaker of the Senate, that somehow we could be able to sneak in the proposals and the amendments that we wanted to have to ensure that the two-third gender rule is finally met. But Madam Speaker, our standing orders are very clear. Once the report was tabled by the committee, and the report did not have a matter, in particular for this instance, the two-third gender bill or recommendations, Madam Speaker, then we know that when that bill, if at all it comes now as a standalone bill, Madam Speaker, the chances of it passing, because again of the numbers that we have in both the National Assembly and the Senate, is that the chances of it passing are nil, Madam Speaker. That is the reality that we are in. As a matter of fact, when we are talking about the Nadco bills, it is imperative that I clear the air, because people are saying that it will still come as a Nadco bill. No, Madam Speaker, it will not come as a Nadco bill. It will come as a standalone bill. And in that essence, Madam Speaker, because it is not going to be a Nadco bill, then the spirit of the House will not be the spirit of bipartisanship, which is what is happening with the Nadco bills. You will note that the Nadco bills, as much as we are both in government and opposition, there is an assumption and we have agreed in passing that we are going to pass these bills, Madam Speaker. Again, I find that in that essence, as I'm contributing to this bill, I find that it was a clear sabotage on the women agenda, Madam Speaker. And as I congratulate the Nadco committee, I also have to fault them for ensuring that 51% of the population of Kenya, yet again, in an opportunity that we could have maximized, Madam Speaker, we have actually let down the women of Kenya. The two-third gender bill is not part of a Nadco bill, is not going to come as a Nadco bill. And in that essence then, Madam Speaker, we will continue to fight that in every single amendment that comes to this House, there is an intentional approach of ensuring that women and girls are represented. Thank you, Senator Wakoli, for pointing out that particular section that says that not more than two-thirds. I do hope that when we pass this bill, it will actually be implemented, because as you have seen in the past list of commissioners, we actually never met the two-thirds gender rule. And if it continues like that, then it is obvious that the most important independent body in the industry of politics, in the field of politics, will not have women represented in it. And in essence, this just contributes to ensuring that we have less and less women being represented in both the National Assembly and the Senate. Madam Speaker, with those few remarks, I would like to say that I support the bill, and I will be in the House to ensure that I rally people during the Committee of the Whole to make sure that we ensure that women are represented in all of these single line items in the bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Faki.
Asante Spika kunipa fursa hii kuchangia mswada wa mabadiliko wa sheria ya IEBC. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni masikitiko kwamba sasa kwa zaidi ya mwaka mmoja hatujakuwa na tume ya uchaguzi katika nchi yetu. Na mswada huu utasaidia pakubwa kuweka tume ofisini ili iweze kufanya kura katika baadhi ya maeneo bunge kadhaa na vile vile maeneo ya wodi ambayo hayana wawakilishi kwa sasa. Mheshimiwa Spika, la msingi ni kwamba wale ambao watachaguliwa kwanza katika ile jopo la kuchagua na vile vile wale makamishna ambao watachaguliwa wawe ni watu wenye tajiriba na watu wenye ukweli na kusimamia haki, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa sababu tumeona kwamba kutoka tuanze kupiga kura, mahali ambapo pameweza kuleta shida sana ni katika tume ya uchaguzi wa kura. Kutoka tulipoanza kura za kwanza za vyama vingi mwaka 1992 mpaka mwaka 2002 ndio tulipata kura ya kwanza ambayo ilikuwa haina shaka, Mheshimiwa Spika. Vile vile tumeona kura zilizofuata zote zimekuwa na shida na vile vile zikaenda mahakamani, na mahakama pia vile vile kwa upande mwingine pia ikaja ikaleta hukumu ambazo hazieleweki. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, tukipata watu wenye tajiriba kuu ambayo wanaweza kusimamia haki, Mheshimiwa Spika, itakuwa bora kwa nchi yetu, kwa sababu tutaweka kaburi la sahau matatizo ambayo yanatokea muda tu baada ya kura kuisha. Mheshimiwa Spika, vile vile tumeona kwamba sheria hii itatoa nafasi kwa IEBC kusimamia mipaka ya maeneo bunge na vile vile maeneo wodi katika nchi yetu. Mheshimiwa Spika, tumeona kwamba kutoka katiba ipitishwe mwaka 2010 hatujaweza kukagua tena maeneo bunge na labda kubadilisha majina ama kutoa mipaka mipya ya maeneo yetu, na tumeona Mheshimiwa Spika kwamba kumekuwa na mkurupuko ama mlipuko wa wingi wa watu katika maeneo yetu, Mheshimiwa Spika, ambapo tunapata kwamba maeneo mengine yana watu wengi kupita kiasi, eneo bunge likiwa na wapigaji kura zaidi ya 300,000 na maeneo bunge mengine anawapiga kura 20,000 au 30,000. Hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika sio sawa, kwa sababu tunataka nchi yetu iwe kuwe na usawa wa uwakilishi, ili watu wasipate shida kutafuta mbunge wao, kwa sababu mbunge ana watu wengi sana wa kuwasimamia. Lakini Mheshimiwa Spika, ni kwamba swala hili la mipaka lazima liende katika bunge la kitaifa na pia lije katika bunge la Senate, kwa sababu sisi Senate ndio tunasimamia ugatuzi, na ugatuzi unawakilishwa mashinani na mabunge ya county. Na kwa vile mabunge ya county yanachaguliwa moja kwa moja kutoka kwa wananchi, Mheshimiwa Spika, itafaa kwamba mswada wa kubadilisha maeneo wodi lazima ifike katika bunge la Senate ili iweze kuangaliwa na kukaguliwa kisawasawa. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa kumalizia ni kwamba ni masikitiko kwamba tumeona bunge la kitaifa liliweza kuwatimua makamishna wa zamani 4 bila ya kufuata mwongozo wa kisawasawa. Mheshimiwa Spika, ilikuwa yule mwenye kushtaki hata ile bodi ambayo tume ambayo ilichaguliwa na rais, ilikuwa wao ndio wenye kushtaki, wao ndio wenye kuchunguza, na wao ndio waliotoa hukumu ya kuondoa watu wale, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hivyo inafaa, Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa shughuli kwa siku za usoni, mswada wote wa kuondoa makamishna, kwa sababu makamishna wale ndio wanasimamia kura za wabunge, kura za magavana, kura za maseneta, lazima mswada ule pia uweze kufikishwa katika bunge la Senate ili tuwe na uamuzi kwa swala hilo. Asante Bi Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii.
John Yuto? No, sorry. Senator Mungatana.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to also give my views on this bill. Madam Speaker, I will make only 3 points. The first one is on the selection panel. Madam Speaker, I support this proposal very much because those of us who have been around, you will remember in the days of the second president, Daniel Moi, and the days of Justice Chesoni as the head of the commission that is charged with electoral processes. Madam Speaker, in those days, Kenya used to appoint the head of the Electoral Commission, and it was a direct appointment. There was no processes in between. We have since progressed to a position where there is a select committee the selection committee that would appoint the people who are supposed to be commissioners. That is progression number 2. But then now this bill has brought progression number 3. That, Madam Speaker, what we have now is a scrutiny of the selection panel itself, which is a development of what was the initial selection panel. So, Madam Speaker, I think this is a very good development and we should support it. And Madam Speaker, we should support and pass this because Kenya, Madam Speaker, in the African continent, and at this time, Madam Speaker, I'm serving as the head of delegation for Pan-African Parliament. Madam Speaker, we are held in very high esteem because of this kind of thing. People discuss Kenya. How do you choose your commissioners? Madam Speaker, it will be a pleasure when we go next for the sessions to tell them, nowadays, it's not the president who appoints. Nowadays, it's not a selection commission which appoints it. We have even interrogated the very selection commission committee so that the panel, the selection panel itself is a democratized institution. So, Madam Speaker, I think we need to agree that we shall support that on principle. Secondly, on the same issue, Madam Speaker, in Tana River County, we are affected because we lost a very able UDA member of county assembly from the ward called Chewani Ward. Madam Speaker, Chewani Ward is in fact like the headquarters of Tana River County. The honorable member who was chosen there, we used to call him Doeni, he didn't stay for too long. He left us because of a tragic road accident. Madam Speaker, the people, and we used to call him the mayor of Tana River because he's right at the center. He went away, and the people of Chewani Ward have remained without representation. So, Madam Speaker, it is of interest to the people of Tana River that this process that will bring in the selection panel and re-establish the IEBC be done as fast as possible. So, Madam Speaker, we have a reason to support this bill, to go as fast as it can with the amendments that I shall be discussing later on in my contribution. So, Madam Speaker, on the selection panel, I leave it there. On the question of delimitation of boundaries, Madam Speaker, I would like to bring to the attention of the House that the process is very, very detailed on how we are going, the IBC is going to delimit the boundaries. But Madam Speaker, I wanted, for purposes of debate, and those who are listening to us, to outline that the schedule that has been provided in this bill is talking about giving public sensitization and then giving a public hearing, those regulations within the third schedule. They make it such that everybody in Tana River would know that there is this process going on. Because, Madam Speaker, in the past, our county, and I'm sure many other counties, it is only the elite who used to participate, giving names, giving opinions in delimitation of boundaries, giving opinions in delimitation of wards. At that time, they used to be called councillor, they used to be called wards, but the members were called councillors. It was only the elite, and people really didn't quite engage. But I'm very glad that in this proposed bill, proposed clause, third schedule, that, Madam Speaker, the people are going to be involved. There will be public hearings. There will be notices. It's not the normal public participation that is said in general, because we have had abuse of what is public participation. Some people, like in the counties, and all of us are aware, people just select the same people to go and sit, and they say there was public participation. The same people are given allowance. The same people are moved from place to place, and then we are told public participation happened. But in this one, there is public hearings, Madam Speaker. It is very clearly delimited. They have gone ahead to explain what would be the concept of public participation under the third schedule. So that elaborate procedure is well taken care of within this bill, and I urge senators, we support this proposed system of delimiting boundaries. Madam Speaker, one of the regulations actually demands that the officers, and they mention them, like the director of survey, is demanded upon by this regulation to give cooperation to the IBC when they are carrying out this process. So that there is a demand that officers from government must give support to this process. So, Madam Speaker, we want to see how this will work out, because in Tana River County, Madam Speaker, places where the wards, our constituencies, where we are bordering with my kind neighbor, Honorable Enoch Wambua from Kitui, places where we voted, places where our people campaigned and voted for candidates, for wards, candidate all the way to the president, places that were in Tana River. Madam Speaker, because of recent disputes that we had, some of them going very bad, and the involvement of police, we have had schools that were actually in Tana River County being annexed by Kitui County. And yet there are polling stations, as we stand now, there are polling stations gazetted on the side of Tana River. So I would be very interested in seeing how we will resolve these issues, because we need to have a resolution. Whether the wards and the areas that are Tana River or our areas that we have delimited with the IBC are now going to be said under the Director of Survey that they're on the other side. So, Madam Speaker, I hope this process will be proper and transparent, and it will settle some of the disputes that we are having on the boundaries with some of our counties, our neighbors in these counties. So I want to laud the third schedule that is proposed in this bill, and I want to really thank the people who put in some thought around that area. The only thing, Madam Speaker, that was not spoken to on the question of delimitation is about the question of the protected constituencies. Madam Speaker, and I'm told that maybe regulations will be set, or maybe it will be a political question that needs to be resolved from the highest officers of this land. But Madam Speaker, every time the word delimitation, every time the word population is mentioned, those of us who come from counties that have huge areas but limited populations, we get very worried. Because as we are speaking now, Madam Speaker, if we go with what the constitutional thresholds have predetermined, in Tana River County, we stand to lose at least one constituency. And Madam Speaker, in fact, if we go strictly by what is supposed to happen, two constituencies are supposed to go so that they merge into one. And that is the constituency of Bura constituency and the Galole constituency. Garsen has the correct populations and all the other parameters. So, Madam Speaker, I would have thought that the Nadco report, on the basis of protecting minorities and on the basis of protecting sparsely populated areas, would have gone to propose constitutional amendments that would protect these areas, these constituencies. Why I say so, Madam Speaker, is because members of parliament who are coming from those areas that are currently protected are worried. Are these constituencies going to be there in the next election? Our people who are voters in those constituencies are worried. Are these constituencies going to be protected? So even as we are talking about the whole area of proper procedure in delimitation, we must also put in our minds the political question of how do we protect these areas that are constituencies that are protected currently, and what do we tell the people, because the people are worried. We have an answer now to the people of Tana River and elsewhere that the wards and the constituencies will be contested once the IBC selection panel is done and the commissioners are in place. We have an answer. But as to how many constituencies the protected constituencies are going to be there, and as to whether those constituencies are going to be available for contest by the honorable members who are seated there or those who are aspiring, and as to whether those constituencies, the voters are going to actually continue benefiting from CDF, we don't have an answer. And I think Nadco should have dealt with this so that people have certainty in terms of the politics of our counties and politics of our constituencies. Madam Speaker, and I just want to underline and emphasize that in this country, we must be fair as we talk about population. I have had other people in this Senate and outside saying if a constituency has 300,000 people and another one has 20,000 people, then it is fair that maybe we give more resources to this other one and leave the other one. But Madam Speaker, I wanted to give a very simple example. In that area where there are 300,000 people in one constituency, the likelihood is that schools are day scholars. People just walk to school and they are back at home. And if you are awarding CDF, for example, and you give them 5,000, 3,000, the day scholar would still walk to school and come back. But in some of our areas, Madam Speaker, you would have to send that child to go and book a lodge. Let's say they have been given 10,000 everyone. He still has to travel, book a place to sleep for the night, and then travel again the following day for him to reach his boarding school, Madam Speaker. Schools are that far. And when the rains have come as they have right now, or the floods have come as they have right now, they will spend, if not the 3,000 like the person of 300,000 members, citizens, they would spend the 10,000 or the 9,000 because of the travel expenses and accommodation. So even that small example will tell you, you still need equal resources, if not more, for those areas. Why, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker? It's because we have somehow to pay for the sins of this country. And I argue this way because we committed a sin some times ago. Madam Speaker, any person who has read sessional paper number 10 of 1965, that Madam Speaker specifically said, the resources of this country, which we have collected from everybody, will be concentrated in high potential areas. Madam Speaker, it was so bad that in parts where we come from, people were saying, tunaenda Kenya, as we are going to Kenya. And it is because of how hard life was. We thank God for the devolution and the things it has done. We thank God for CDF and the things it has done. So in terms of reparation for these areas, I want to persuade honorable members here, even outside, that when we say, don't touch CDF, leave it like that, don't say it is unfair, because historically, we are doing reparation to some of these areas. So, Madam Speaker, finally, I want to talk about the question of the JLAC proposals to this, to amend this bill. Madam Speaker, I have listened carefully to the proposals from the committee of JLAC here, the Senate Committee on Legal. Madam Speaker, the proposals that the Senate Committee has proposed, they are so important that I am urging members at the third reading, we must ensure that we pass our amendments in this House, Madam Speaker. We cannot have a situation where we are passing a law that is against us. And you see, Madam Speaker, a lot of times people don't pay attention to these things, like one honorable senator has said, that we debate the principles and the details, we leave them out. I think what JLAC has proposed, we must make sure those amendments passed. They are passed at third reading, so that when we take them back to the National Assembly, and the National Assembly agrees with them, then it is good, because both houses must be represented in these processes. But if the National Assembly says no, we must stick our guns and we must go for mediation. We must not allow a situation where even things to do with boundary demarcation, we are being told that we are not, we are not part of that. It is the National Assembly. Why? We should not accept that. We should not pass any such laws. And I really want to commend the Justice and Legal Committee for the work they have done. Those proposals they have made, let us not leave even one of them to go without passing at the third reading. And Madam Speaker, I pray that a special announcement be made when that matter is coming, when this bill is coming for committee of the whole, so that we are all there and we make a shame of those people who, and we get to know the betrayers of the Senate, because some are seated with us and they are supporters of the National Assembly, because in the next election, some have even declared that they are going to run in the National Assembly. Some of us have been there. We don't want the National Assembly ever again. We are in a senior house and we must put our house in order. It is not a solution for you to support whatever National Assembly brings because you intend to run there in the next election. I think we must make a special arrangement so that at the Committee of the Whole, we support the amendments that JLAC has proposed, so that, Madam Speaker, we are able to keep the dignity of this House, especially on matters to do with delimitation of boundaries. Madam Speaker, as I sit and conclude, I wanted to say it is so very well to prepare a panel to appoint IEBC commissioners and everybody else. But Madam Speaker, there is a critical thing about the automation and the systems in the IEBC that we have not yet touched in this bill. Madam Speaker, when I inquired, why is it that nothing has been discussed about the electoral system, how we vote, how we transmit the results to the constituency, how the presidential results are being transmitted up to the bombers of Kenya at the national. Madam Speaker, I was told that there will be regulations by the IEBC. I pray, Madam Speaker, that this be done in good time. The problem with human beings, Madam Speaker, they are subject to manipulation. But systems, if left to work efficiently, they are less subject to manipulation as opposed to human beings. So we must, the way forward.
That is fine. Just
Yes,
one minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was just concluding and saying the way forward for our electoral system is for us to prepare foolproof, automated systems. It's not even in selection of these people. Because even if we select commissioners, some are with you today, some are against you. Some are against you today, some are with you tomorrow. But systems, if they are foolproof, if we all agree, the opposition and the government side, they all agree that this system is the one we'll go, I'm sure that we will have less acrimony after results are announced. Madam Speaker, we should invest all the attention on the systems rather than the personnel. For me, the personnel we have seen from the previous election that people can just do things. But Madam Speaker, if it is machines, when we go to pay KRA, they don't care. You pay this amount, you must pay. If you have overloaded your lorry, it passes and it's in your name, you must pay. It doesn't know you are a member of parliament, you are a senator, you are a governor. If it's overloaded, you have to pay. And this is how systems will help us give more credible results as elections are being done. With those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I beg to support with those amendments proposed by JLAC. Thank you.
Senator Osoti.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity again to make my voice heard on the IBC amendments bill. Mr. Speaker, we must commend the Nadco team for coming up with this bill, and I want to join my colleague, Senator Wambua, to say that this is a product of bipartisan negotiations between Azimio and Kenya Kwanza. And I think quite a number of the proposals contained in this bill are going to address some of the challenges that we have had in this country in terms of election management. But I also think a lot needs to be done, Madam Speaker, to ensure that we have a level playing field in our election. And we will also have an opportunity to look at the proposals contained in the elections amendment bill, which is also a product of Nadco. Madam Speaker, allow me to comment on the composition of the selection panel. The bill says that 2 persons shall be nominated by the Parliamentary Service Commission to represent the minority and majority parties. Mr. Speaker, whereas I agree with that, I think there is something missing in that. What is missing in that is how political parties will be directly involved in that nomination process. Because if you give that task purely to the Parliamentary Service Commission to determine for you the choice of the minority and the choice of the majority, you are likely not to get the right people that the parties want to be represented with. I want to give an example. The current panel, someone who was nominated to represent Azimio was not even known to Azimio leadership. So we want a scenario, and I will be proposing amendment on this, that we must have a preliminary process done by the majority political party and minority political party to submit, even if it means 3 names, to the Parliamentary Service Commission, and then the Parliamentary Service Commission will then choose 1 representative from a minority and 1 representative from majority, from among the names submitted by political parties. Because otherwise, Madam Speaker, we will not be doing justice to the political parties if we allow Parliamentary Service Commission, which we know is dominated by the side on the government side, to choose for us, the minority, our representation in this selection panel. Madam Speaker, the same applies to the PPLC. PPLC process must also have the input of the political parties, the majority political party and the minority political party. Madam Speaker, I have served in the PPLC, and PPLC is a club of briefcase parties. There are over 80 political parties. The main political parties in PPLC, that is ODM, UDA, and the other big parties, do not feel safe in PPLC. They are intimidated by these briefcase parties. Now you are giving them chance to determine for you 3 persons, 1 for the majority party, 1 for the minority party, and 1 for the other small parties. They will always give you a choice, which they feel is their best choice. Again, we need the involvement of the respective parties. We must have a preliminary process of choosing the names, which are then presented to them to decide. Otherwise, we will not be doing favor and justice to the majority and minority party. Madam Speaker, we want to agree. The main contestation in our election has been the use of technology. We saw that in 2017 And we saw that in 2022. But looking at the selection panel, I do not see how that aspect of use of technology is being captured. I would have wished that we had at least one expert on ICT matters sitting on this selection panel. Because we have also proposed that the chairperson of the commission must have ICT experience and knowledge, apart from accounting knowledge. Yes, accounting knowledge is captured by ISPAC, but IT, there is no one in that panel who is adequately experienced and knowledgeable on matters of ICT to help us get the right commissioner who will have ICT knowledge, which is very critical in the election management. Madam Speaker, the proposal to have Parliamentary Service Commission to cater for the budget of the selection, I don't know how that decision was arrived at. Because, Madam Speaker, we are suffering in this House because of low budget. Our committees are not able to run effectively. Now, we put a budget towards Nadco. Now we are putting another budget on this election committee. And yet we have no additional budget as Parliament. This is a process that will lead to commissioners being appointed for IEBC. The right institution that should have catered for the budget for this process should have been IEBC. I'm wondering where Parliamentary Service Commission is coming in. We are just one of the bodies that is going to facilitate the appointment of the commissioners. We have other bodies like LSK, we have ISPAC, we have PPLC, we have Interreligious Council. This should have been the budget of IEBC, not Parliamentary Service Commission. We are setting a wrong precedence as Parliament that we want to cover the budget for other institutions when we have strained budget as a Parliament. So I am not opposing that, but I am questioning that decision to say that budget will be covered by Parliamentary Service Commission. Madam Speaker, I am also very excited about the decision to amend this act so that the decisions of the Commission shall not be made by one person without the concurrence of the majority of the members. Mr. Speaker, we saw in the last election, the commissioner, chairperson of the commission, where there were accusations that the chairperson of the commission made unilateral decision. We saw the contestation between Chebukati and Cherera 4, that the decision on the results were only communicated to them. They were not involved in tabulating the final results. This amendment is going to take care of that limitation that we had in 2022 election. Mr. Speaker, the use of technology, it is the big issue. It is actually the elephant in the house on matters of electoral justice in this country. And we have, us on this side, we have been talking about opening of servers. We hope that the servers will be opened so that Kenyans can know the truth. But even as we are talking about that, we need to factor that in law. And we are going to have an opportunity to discuss the amendments to the Election Act. And one amendment that I would have expected the Nadco team to deal with was an amendment on Section 44(8) of the Election Act. Mr. Speaker, Section 44(8) provides that there will be a joint ICT technical committee on matters of adoption of technology, and use of technology. But Mr. Speaker, just before the 2022 election, this section was amended further to make it discretionary for IBC to determine whether to have external people or not. And that is why there were problems around adoption of technology. In 2017, we had this committee, Madam Speaker, and I sat on that committee. We even were taken to Dubai to assess the technology, the printing of ballot papers, and as a result, we got adequate information that helped us to execute our matter in the Supreme Court. But in 2022, because of that amendment, that mysterious amendment, it was not possible, and that is why, Mr. Speaker, a lot of questions arose around use of technology. Political parties and all the stakeholders must be involved in the process of adoption of technology, from procurement, installation, testing, and implementation. They must be involved from day one to the last day of the election until the results are declared to the nation. So I would be proposing that maybe we need to revisit that section 44(8) of the Election Act and ensure that it is mandatory for IBC to have a joint technical committee on matters of ICT that is composed of all the stakeholders, including political parties. And that way, we'll be able to deal with the problem of use of technology in our election. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, sorry, on the issue of delimitation of boundaries, I want to say that this bill talks about the use of latest official population census report as a basis for delimitation of boundaries. Whereas I agree with that because that is also provided in the Constitution. But Mr. Speaker, we have had contestation around census. And census in this country has been made a secret. I remember even IBC, prior to 2022 election, they were complaining that they were not able to get the official census report. Sorry, Madam Speaker. The official census report from Kenya National Bureau of Standards. Census report must not be a secret. It should be an open thing, and I support the provisions in this bill that this report must be subjected to public scrutiny, so that those who are contesting the numbers that are being posted by the National Bureaus of Statistics are free to do that. We have had concerns that have been raised by the people of northern Kenya, western Kenya, which to date they have not been addressed. So, and you know, Madam Speaker, this data is used on many things, including division of revenue. It is the most important data that must go through proper public scrutiny. Madam Speaker, we also need to ensure there is fairness, so that population, yes, is important, but distribution of these constituencies and wards must ensure some equity. I want to give an example. There is a constituency in my county called Hamisi. It is big, it is, has population, but when you apply this formula, they miss the target by around 5,000 people. Are we going to deny Vihiga County a new constituency on that basis and allocate all the constituencies in one area? I think there must be a system of saying that constituencies which are almost getting to the threshold in every county must enjoy at least one additional constituencies. And then the others are spread in the other areas. And that proposal was in the BBI, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, as we talk about delimitation of the constituencies, we should not just talk about the numbers, but we will also look at equitable distribution of these constituencies across the 47 counties. Madam Speaker, the clause 7, which is amending section 24 of IBC Act, I think we need to amend it, as you had suggested, to ensure that when we refer to parliamentary parties, we need to be very specific. We are referring to parliamentary parties in the Senate and National Assembly. When we make references to National Assembly, that the National Assembly will receive the delimitation report, they will discuss it, they will debate it, they will forward it to the IBC. Where do you leave Senate? This section 24B, clause 7, is unconstitutional because Senate cannot be left out of a serious matter of delimitation of constituencies. So I think that one, I don't know, Senator Omogeni was sitting in that Nadco. I don't know where he was. We respect him. He's a senior counsel in this country. But it is very unfortunate that a mistake of this high magnitude was made without our representation noticing that the National Assembly should not have unilateral powers on matters of delimitation of constituencies without the involvement of Senate as well. Madam Speaker, I think those are the few things I want to say about this bill, and also want to urge that the Nadco spirit must be adhered to. People went on the street, people died agitating for electoral justice, and I think it's important for us to give them that justice by ensuring that we pass this law and we pass any other law that has been brought to us so that people can get justice. And as we go on, Madam Speaker, I think it is also important that we look at the other election-related laws and ensure that they are panel beaten so that we have these election laws in place at least 2 years before the election, as had been proposed by the Krugler Commission, that laws must be in place at least 2 years before the election, so that we do not hurry the amendments to the laws and end up having elections, which has been done in a hurry, and the challenges that we have at the moment. Madam Speaker, with those few remarks, I want to support this bill with amendments. Thank you.
Senator Newton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to me to also air my views regarding this particular bill, Madam Speaker. And I want to say right from the onset that I support most of the recommendations, most of the amendments that are being made in this bill, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we know that the selection of the commissioners to IEBC has been an issue that has always caused us problems because then this has a direct bearing on the fairness of an election, Madam Speaker. And that the amendments made, Madam Speaker, on the membership of the selection panel of IEBC commissioners, of course, is going to involve both the majority and minority parties, Madam Speaker, is something that should be encouraged by all of us. Because, Madam Speaker, we all live in this country, whether we are on the minority side or the majority side. And every time that we have a dispute regarding the fairness or otherwise of an election, Madam Speaker, then of course our economy suffers and our people's businesses and their way of lives, their normal lives, Madam Speaker, are disrupted. And so the fact that both the majority and minority will be considered in picking the members of this particular panel, Madam Speaker, is something that makes me feel that this bill is a progressive bill, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the fairness of a selection panel would not be guaranteed or would not be appreciated by Kenyans if those members were going to be picked only by parliamentary parties or politicians, Madam Speaker. And the fact that some professional bodies like the Certified Public Accountant of Kenya, that is ISPAC, Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya, that is ISPAC, will also produce a member to this particular panel, Madam Speaker, of course, is something that is progressive, because then we expect that such professional bodies will not be politically, inclined, Madam Speaker. LSK will also produce a member to this panel, which is also a good thing. Madam Speaker, Kenya is, I do not want to say it's a notoriously religious community, but Madam Speaker, the people of Kenya are religious. That we are also going to have a member from the Interreligious Council of Kenya, Madam Speaker, will add to the trust that Kenyans will have in this selection panel. And I think that is very progressive, and that makes me feel that this is a bill that should be supported, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we have been having sometimes commissions, committees, panels that are picked to do a particular job, but then they overstay, or they overstay, and of course, then end up squandering huge amounts of money from the public coffers, Madam Speaker. That we have been provided that there is an amendment that this election panel will be dissolved 3 months after it has been selected, Madam Speaker, or picked, is something that is encouraging, so that they will come, do their job. After 3 months, they go home, and then we will have savings on the expenditure that we would have incurred from the public coffers, Madam Speaker. So I'm excited by the fact that this panel will be dissolved within 3 months, and only the mandate can only be extended as per provided in the amendment upon careful considerations by Parliament, Madam Speaker. And I think that is something that is very encouraging to me. Madam Speaker, about the delimitation of constituency and ward boundaries is something that took a lot of my time when I was looking at this particular bill and the amendments that have been proposed. Madam Speaker, one thing that this encourages me in is that we will involve all and sundry, our people in the villages, because of course there is a provision for public participation, and one thing that is very important, not just public participation, but there will be sensitization of people or of the members of the public, Madam Speaker. One thing that was not very clear, or is not very clear in the amendment, is whether when we are collecting the views of the public, whether we have a provision to have such views collected in vernacular, Madam Speaker, because we have some people that are very knowledgeable, but who may not be very good in the two languages that is Kiswahili and English, Madam Speaker. So I would have loved to see a recommendation or an amendment or a suggestion that these views can also be collected in vernacular, and that a provision is made for a good interpreter in order for the views of all and sundry, Madam Speaker, to be captured. And I say this because over the last 20 or so years, we have had a great expansion on vernacular media, Madam Speaker, vernacular radio stations, vernacular TVs, and our people have been given a lot of civic education through these vernacular stations, Madam Speaker. And because we want their views also, I think a provision should be made in order for us to see to it that those that are views that they can only express in vernacular, of course, are not left out of this otherwise very important process that affects them directly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think I want to join those that spoke before me that talked about the figures that the population census normally produces. The figures have been disputed in the past. So I think there should be a better process of doing or carrying out a population census, Madam Speaker. And by this, I think I would propose that even as the officers carrying out the census visit homes and places of work to collect data on a population and counting of people in quotes, Madam Speaker, that they would then also refer to the data with the Civil Registration Bureau, Madam Speaker, so that we are not told of numbers that are non-existent in some places, that every other information, every other piece of information that they collect then is compared and contrasted against what we have at the Bureau or at the Civil Registration Agency, Madam Speaker, so that we can get the exact numbers of people that we have in our region. So the budget by the fact, Madam Speaker, that that we will have individual responsibility of officers, especially when we are doing delimitation of boundaries. That any officer, Madam Speaker, that is supposed to publish on the Kenya Gazette the views of the public, and they fail to do so, that they can be prosecuted, and they will have committed an offense and are liable to imprisonment for a term of 1 year. So that, Madam Speaker, we bring in individual responsibility, so that we do not have people that have been compromised somewhere, leading to failure in publishing important information on Kenya Gazette that has an effect. So I think that is also something that caught my eye, and that I thought was very important, because, Madam Speaker, we should slowly move from collective responsibility to individual responsibility of anyone serving in a public office, especially if it's a matter that affects the public, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we need a foolproof election. Because, like I had started by saying, when we have these disputes, then some of us who value our peace, some of us who are very patriotic and would not want to see any destruction of property and disruption of people's lives, would want to see a fair and free election every 5 years, Madam Speaker. And that is why I like the provision or the amendment that requires the Commission to review its operations and make necessary changes required to make its operations more efficient, effective, transparent, and accountable, Madam Speaker. We need to improve on the efficiency of our elections, Madam Speaker. We do not want to hear cries of Fungua Sava every 5 years or after every election. And so, Madam Speaker, I think I come from an education background, Madam Speaker, and there is a review of the methods that are used in imparting knowledge every year. So I think it's important that IEBC reviews its performance to see its effectiveness, reviews the effectiveness of its technology, Madam Speaker, reviews the system of transmission of data from polling stations to county tallying officers, or county tallying stations, or even constituency tallying stations, Madam Speaker. This needs to be reviewed. The training of staff at IEBC, and especially those that are employed temporarily. We know of presiding officers, deputy presiding officers, polling clerks, counting clerks. The IEBC needs to do a review of the training and the performance of especially these temporary or these officers that are engaged by the Commission on temporary basis, Madam Speaker. And so that is also something that caught my eye and that made me feel that I should strongly support this bill, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there is also a provision that any decision that the review of boundaries has given can be challenged by any individual, that any individual can go to court and challenge the decision on the delimitation of any boundaries, Madam Speaker, which is important because sometimes I could go and give my views as a member of the public, which the Commission may choose to ignore. That I have the option of going to court after this and pursuing my justice, Madam Speaker, at least within 30 days of the publication of such a decision. Madam Speaker, is encouraging because we want every Kenyan to have the right to question any authority in this country, Madam Speaker, and that such dispute, such suit will be sorted in 3 months' time, Madam Speaker, because we have had situations where somebody goes to court. Sometimes it could even be an election petition, Madam Speaker, and we know sometimes, especially previously, we did not have limits on which or within which an election dispute could be sorted out apart from that of the presidency. So that some of these decisions are made too deep into the term of parliament that whatever decision is made, Madam Speaker, does not benefit even the petitioner, Madam Speaker. And I think that is a right that these particular amendments have sought to provide and protect. And I think that is a very important matter, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have heard my colleague, Senator Osotsi, mention about the budget, that PSC should provide the budget for this particular panel, Madam Speaker, and I think I also wanted to comment on it. I think if we will have to retain that amendment, then we can have a proviso that during the particular fiscal year or financial year, when we have this kind of review, that then there is an extra budget given or a provision is made that PSC will have an extra expenditure, and therefore we put it in law that during such an year, then we will have an extra allocation to Parliamentary Service Commission. Otherwise, like my colleague Senator Ososi said, it would be very unfair to have the same allocation but be given a different or an extra expenditure, Madam Speaker. That would be unfair because, of course, we know that we are suffering budgetary constraints at PSC, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, we want a very progressive society. We want people to be satisfied with the election that we make with the delimitation of boundaries, Madam Speaker, the names and the extent. And we will be looking forward to such a time that we can be able to review boundaries of counties, Madam Speaker, and even, if possible, then even create more counties. And Senator Karungo Thangwa is here. We would want to see Thika being created as a county separated from Kiambu, because this is a county that is populated by over half of the county people from Murang'a, but the county government of Kiambu proudly collects revenue from our people without any benefit to our people. And Madam Speaker, finally, we need to defend the protected constituencies. In Murang'a, we have Madhioya constituency and Kangema constituency. We would not want to hear that these constituencies, Madam Speaker, have been collapsed. So even as we do the limitation of boundaries, the constituencies that are protected should remain protected. And if you are doing the limitation everywhere else, we should not touch the protected constituencies, Madam Speaker. Kangema constituency in Murang'a, Madhioya constituency in Murang'a should be protected alongside other constituencies that are protected. And especially because CDF is allocated based on the number of constituencies. So as Murang'a, we would not want to hear of a situation where we lose CDF from one constituency because there has been a collapse of 2 or more constituencies, Madam Speaker. And with that, I submit and I support the bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Mandago.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this bill. Honorable Speaker, from the onset, I want to say I support the proposals for the amendments of this bill, Honorable Speaker, but with a number of concerns, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, this bill first sets to correct or to remedy the current situation we are in as a country, where a number of constituencies, a number of wards in our country, Honorable Speaker, have been without representation for more than a year because of the absence of the electoral body. Honorable Speaker, the amendments that have been brought and discussed under Nadco, Honorable Speaker, are good, but we have areas of concern, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I've read through this bill, and my first concern, Honorable Speaker, is the role of the Senate as a parliament. Honorable Speaker, when you come through this bill in all the sections, reference have only been made to National Assembly. Honorable Speaker, the Senate is there to represent counties. This delimitation of boundaries is going to happen in counties. And therefore, when the proposals are being made by the electoral body and being submitted to National Assembly, Honorable Speaker, the role of the Senate must be defined so that Parliament in this bill would then mean the Senate and National Assembly. Honorable Speaker, the provision under Part 2 of the elimination of units, Honorable Speaker, the electoral body has been mandated to review of the names and boundaries of constituencies, review the number of names and boundaries. Honorable Speaker, this section, subsection 2, is a section that, Honorable Speaker, in the regulation must be clearly defined. And this, my curiosity has been aroused by the recent statements from the National Cohesion Commission, listing a number of counties that they intend to propose the changes of names, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, names have meaning, and there are reasons as to why those names exist. I think it is only in Africa where we've been made to believe that your names are the cause of the problem. It's only in Africa, Honorable Speaker, that has been told you should rewrite your history, forgive and forget, just the way some Western countries have wanted us to forgive and forget the atrocities committed by the colonialists, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I'm just wondering loudly, if we change the name of a county, what happens to the name of a constituency? What happens to the name of a ward? What happens with the name of a location? What happens to the name of a sub-location? What happens to the name of a village, Honorable Speaker? I think, Honorable Speaker, names of locations or counties or sub-counties have never made Kenyans to fight. People don't fight in West Pokot because it is called West Pokot. Honorable Speaker, this naming of boundaries, naming of counties and constituencies is a matter that needs to be looked into deeply, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the period that has been provided under Section 7, that the National Assembly shall within 14 days of the tabling of the revised preliminary report consider the report and forward recommendation of the Commission, failure to which, Honorable Speaker, the report will be deemed accepted. Honorable Speaker, we know how Parliament operates. That period is too short to allow for conversations along the report that has been submitted. Because, Honorable Speaker, the issue of delimitation of boundaries is a very emotive issue. It's an issue that accompanies sharing of resources. It's an issue that determines how a region or an area will be administered. There is need to provide sufficient time for Parliament to have a conversation so that the report can be adopted. Otherwise, Madam Speaker, there could be a situation where the tabling, adoption, and debating of the report is not prioritized, and 7 days lapses, and the electoral body then decisions and recommendations takes precedence over what the representatives of the people would have conversed and agree upon. Madam Speaker, the issue of composition that has been provided, Madam Speaker, I have issues. One of Section C, Law Society of Kenya has been given the opportunity to nominate. East Park has been given the opportunity to nominate Interreligious Council. Madam Speaker, there has been a growing trend in this country that the only professional bodies that seem to be getting representation in almost all the independent commissions, in almost all other agencies where we need representation other than what Parliament has determined, that we only have representation from the Law Society of Kenya and ISPAC, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if we are talking about electoral management in this country, the only other cadre of public servants who have managed elections are the teachers, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if we are to go back to the last general election and look at the number of presiding officers, deputy presiding officers, clerical officers, Madam Speaker, you will be surprised that 90% of the human resource required to manage our elections are actually teachers. I am therefore surprised to see these two professional bodies being given the opportunity to do that, and teachers not being given representation while they form the bulk and the stake of the management of our election. Honorable Senators here, Madam Speaker, who went for elections know that the majority of their agents and even their coordinators, they were teachers, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I therefore propose, when time comes, that we need to look into this composition of professional bodies so that it is not only two professional bodies in this country that are left to be permanent members of all these independent commissions. Where there is need, Madam Speaker, I would propose that there be rotations in the various professional bodies that we have in this country so that all are given the opportunity, Madam Speaker, to contribute to their country. Madam Speaker, in this matter of composition also is the issue of qualification and experience, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it would be extremely very important and necessary to ensure that the qualification and experience are clearly defined so that even as the various professional bodies and independent bodies are going to nominate through a competitive process their representation into the electoral body, Madam Speaker, we should have a bare minimum qualification and experience required because this is a very important exercise for the country, Madam Speaker, and we would like it handled in the most professional manner and in a manner that is going to allow this country to make progress. Madam Speaker, I've also looked at the fifth schedule, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, in that fifth schedule, section 7.3, representation of the Commission may be made orally or in writing. Madam Speaker, this talks about public hearings. And in these public hearings, Madam Speaker, the electoral body will be required to organize public hearings in counties and sub-counties for members of the public to make their submission. In section 3 of that, Madam Speaker, the representation to the Commission may be made orally or in writing. Madam Speaker, I propose that even where submissions have been made in writing, Madam Speaker, the electoral body must read out that memorandum during that public hearing so that all sundry and present, all concerned stakeholders in that county or sub-county or constituency or ward, Madam Speaker, would know what have been submitted by the various stakeholders. Madam Speaker, there has been a tendency of some organizations or some mischievous individuals to sneak in proposals in writing which might be considered without the general input of the rest of the public, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I propose that all submissions, whether written, must be read out loudly in a language that is understood by a majority of the citizens in that electoral area, Madam Speaker. This will give opportunity to the citizens to know the various submissions that have been made, and once the Commission retreats to make a decision, then members of the public will know it is based on actually what was submitted by the various stakeholders, and the various considerations have been given, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on section 9 of that schedule, it speaks about dissemination of maps, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, it says the Commission shall prepare and publish maps in its website. Madam Speaker, publishing the maps in the website is good because it's cost-effective, easily accessible by those with capacity in terms of technology and access to internet, Madam Speaker. But, Madam Speaker, this limits the rest of the public who are not accessible to internet, and we all know, Madam Speaker, that not all parts of this country have access to internet. Although we want to thank the national government, Madam Speaker, because there is a robust program to roll out the digital superhighway in this country. But, Madam Speaker, because of redundancy measures, and we know sometimes technology can fail us, it is completely necessary that the Electoral Commission then publishes the maps and makes them available, either to the county or to the constituency or to the wards that are being delimited, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this will give the public the opportunity to scrutinize the maps, because boundaries, Madam Speaker, have also been a contributor of wrangles and disagreements, and sometimes causing even fights, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we as a country and as a continent, we know what the colonial boundaries have done to us, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, today we have a problem between communities that have been divided between two nationalities, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, today we have the Maasai people of Kenya and we have the Maasai people of Tanzania. We have the Teso people of Uganda, we have the Teso people of Kenya. We have the Pokot of Kenya, we have the Pokot of Uganda, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, you've seen how sometimes when movement of livestock for just purposes of grazing, which was a normal occurrence for us Africans to move around with our livestock and graze, has created a lot of security concerns and issues, leaving us with devastated relationship between countries and communities, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, therefore, when these maps are availed to the community, there is opportunity to review and agree in a manner that is going to foster the relationship and inter-community relations within that jurisdiction, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this will create acceptance and make the work of the Commission easy, even as they conclude their report, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the other provision for access is that it will be available in Parliament. Madam Speaker, Parliament is a restricted area. it is extremely difficult for citizens to access parliament. Even our own offices in Bunge Towers, Madam Speaker, you realize that the number of security officers might be twice the members of parliament, Madam Speaker, who have offices in Bunge Towers. And Madam Speaker, if you walk around Bunge Towers, you might misconstrue it to be a unit within our security organs, Madam Speaker, by virtue of the number of security officers. Therefore, if this bill then says that the maps will be available in Parliament, Madam Speaker, in short we shall be saying Kenyan citizens who want to access these maps would not have the opportunity to. And I therefore propose, Madam Speaker, that the maps be availed to the counties, to the constituencies, to the wards whose boundaries are being delineated so that citizens can access. And Madam Speaker, there are various organs of government that can be used to avail this to the public to the lowest unit. Madam Speaker, the National Government Administration is one such state organ that can quickly disseminate information to the lowest level, Madam Speaker, including the village, coordinated by a village elder, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, access to information to Kenyans is a provision in our constitution that Kenyans should not be denied because we are doing boundary reviews, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this bill is definitely long overdue, and as a country, it is regrettable that we had to be in such a state. And we hope that since this is a product of both the majority party and the minority parties in Parliament, Madam Speaker, this will put an end to quarrels through the election and electoral processes and post-election quarrels, so that the country cannot be permanently being set on electoral mood, but enable the country to immediately after elections to be able to move into nation building, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I support with the amendments that we shall seek to propose at the Committee of the Whole. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Onyonka.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also contribute to this very important amendment bill of what has bedeviled our country for a very long time. Madam Speaker, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission Amendment Bill 2024 is a document that I want, first of all, Madam Speaker, to congratulate the Majority Leader and the leadership on our side, because essentially, Madam Speaker, this is a bipartisan document. I have listened to my colleagues make the contributions, and I believe all of us kind of agree on the basics. The small differences and variations will most probably come in when we are having the sitting of the full House. I would like, Madam Speaker, to then persuade my colleagues that I think maybe for the third or fourth time, we are going to start discussing the software of our electoral process. The software is that previously the arguments which were being made and even the discussions which were taking place, they were based on the arguments that this thing is that when the winner takes it, he should take it all. And Madam Speaker, I've always said how I wish that our Kenyan brothers and sisters in the ruling class would understand that sometimes politics is never the winner takes it all. It's about sharing. It's about a give and take. It's about maintaining and sustaining a country that has come from adversity and a country that is going to move on to its great potential. Nadco is a good document. It deals with delimitation of boundaries. It deals with the commissioners who are going to be managing this commission, the chair and the members who exist. It deals with how these people are going to be selected and the structure. One of the issues that I would want us to look at in this House, because we are the Senate, is how we begin to handle the clamor and the request for counties to be increased. Madam Speaker, I was in Korea over the weekend because I lost a very good friend of mine, and the members of that community, in their discussion, you know we discuss politics in funerals, their contention is that they want Korea to be given a county. Why? Because according to them, the feeling is that they have been marginalized, and they feel that if they got a county, they would most probably feel included and given an opportunity to chart their future. And Madam Speaker, the point I raised in that funeral, I told them, honestly, from where I stand, I don't see them getting that county government. But what I saw, Madam Speaker, is that there is a way we can actually solve the problem of those areas. You're talking about Mount Elgon, where there's been a lot of discussion and anger towards the fact that the people of Mount Elgon, especially the Sabaot, feel like they have been excluded from whatever that was taking place in Trans Nzoia County. You have the Kuria who feel like they have been excluded from Migori County. You have the people from there's an area in the Central Rift who also feel that with time and with their history, they needed to create their own constituencies. What I would like to introduce and suggest to my colleagues and my very good brother Haron, who is the majority leader, is that I think, Haron, we need to look at a way on how, yes, we can create protection of certain constituencies and ring-fence those constituencies. For example, I don't see a contradiction if Kuria was given 2 extra constituencies without them being given a county. I believe that because the concept of national government releasing funds to constituencies, and in this case, those constituencies would, if it's in Kuria, then now they have 2. If you increased 2, there would be 4. And that automatically means that Kuria, as a community, the 4 counties of Kuria would actually be getting 1 billion shillings. If you add that onto what the national government would be giving out through the Senate as revenue that is going to the Migori County, they would actually be a beneficiary to such an arrangement. It would accommodate the marginalization. It would give resources to this community that feels that they have not been part of us. That is exactly the same argument I would make about my county, which is Kisii. And that is that the Kisii County, there has been a question and a debate which has been going on over and over whether we should actually have gotten 3 counties in Kisii. My argument is, yes, if we get an extra county in Kisii, that would be a very good idea. But I would wish that this team would look at amendments where we again create protected constituencies. And in this case, in Kisii, I wouldn't mind, and the community has talked about the Bobasi constituency, which has got actually 12 wards. It has 12 wards. The Member of Parliament, Mr. Obiri, when you talk to him, he tells you, even when I've been given CDF, I have 242 secondary schools. I have 215 primary schools. He has all sorts of things. With that amount of money, there is no way he's going to manage to run Bobasi constituency with that kind of money. So, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, my argument is, let us be magnanimous and look at these options. If the people of Bobasi were to be given 1 constituency and the people of South Mugirango are given another constituency, for me, Kisii would be done. Kisii doesn't need an extra county because the resources would come and those resources will substitute whatever else that the county government would do. And indeed, the resources that the county government of Kisii is getting, if it is utilized well, I don't think anybody in Kisii would really complain. The other issue, Madam Speaker, that is very critical and that I have felt that we needed to look at the structure of IEBC, not in terms of how it's going to be designed and the members of the members who are going to be the commissioners, but in terms of we as the Senate, our responsibility is devolution. How I wish that we could actually devolve the IEBC. I believe we have the capacity of making sure that we change the structure constitutionally so that results don't have to be transmitted from Nairobi. If you have IEBC being localized in Kisii County and you have an IEBC county commissioner who runs those elections and in fact makes announcements on the elections, on the ones for the presidency, makes announcements on the ones for the members of parliament, of the Senate, makes announcements for the women rep and the members of the county assembly. I don't see any contradiction on that at all. And it will be much easier in that you can always pick those counties and you can look at it. If you look at the structure of the US, that's what they do. In a period of one day, they will tell you, we look at the trend and we can see, if you look at this county, look at that one, look at that one. If you look, if you look at the states, if you look at all our counties, by the time the elections are being conducted and 25 of these counties have announced the results, you can actually tell who is going to win these elections. The other issue that, Madam Speaker, I would like to ask my Majority Leader to consider, Majority Leader, my honest observation is that if there was a way on how like my brother Mugatana has said, and I think it was Osotsi who said, let us engage ourselves openly and sincerely on what we are going to do with technology. India has got 1.2 billion voters. India has got only 3 commissioners. Everything that India runs is technological, and the technology is so simple. It is so simple. If you see it, because when I was a Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs, I was once taken to go and observe even the machine itself, the way it is. It is so plain. They just tell you, can you touch there? Who are you voting? You look at the candidate, you press on that, and it gives you a receipt on who you voted for. And these are the things that we must begin to look at and interrogate, so that when the elections are called, when the presidential elections are announced, like I've heard my colleagues say from the other side of the aisle, let these elections be believable, let these elections be verifiable, and let us know who has won. Let us not have the doubts, and let us have, many of us who win or lose, make our elections the boogeyman. Every election after 5 years, we are having disputes, we are having violence, we are making noise, and we are screaming at each other. The truth is that this country deserves better. This country can actually succeed in making sure that its elections are believable, verifiable, and they are an election that Kenyans can believe in. I do believe, Madam Speaker, that if what is here, with a few of the amendments here and there, I believe that our country should be able to conduct its elections as a model country. Madam Speaker, my experience has been, and I've been around here for quite a bit, my experience has been, and I had one of my brother, Danson Mugatana, because of experience, talking about how when he's down at the Pan-African Parliament, the comments people give about Kenya. The truth is, yes, we have a good name. Yes, people respect us internationally because we've done well as a country. The only blemish we have constantly had, and if you look at it, is that every 5 years we are having disputes about our elections. If we fix that, I believe that we should be able to fix our elections. And that, Madam Speaker, makes me believe that even the issue of why is it that the presidency in this country, every 5 years there's a disagreement between the president and his deputy and all these other individuals. I think we need to reduce our disagreements, which are political, which are not based on any ideology other than the fact that we are fighting over whatever little that our country is able to give us, and then it disrupts the economic programs. How I wish that members of the KK Alliance, as we speak right now, would be disagreeing on policy, would be disagreeing on ideology, would be disagreeing on environmental issues, would be disagreeing on industrial development and growth. how I wish would be disagreeing on whether our education is on the right basis, whether it is CBC 844 or the British system that we had before. These are the things we should be disagreeing about, and not whether somebody should be traveling to certain areas where we come from, so that then we can show them how we are protected and secured by our tribes and communities for whatever reason. And that is why, Madam Speaker, I would like to say in my final remarks that the argument that population should determine the delimitation of boundaries must never be an absolute. There must be other variables which we can use to come and determine, even when there's the clamor. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, it's now 1 p.m. Time to adjourn the Senate. Senator Wanyonka, you still have 7 minutes of your time when we resume. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until today, Wednesday, 29th May 2024 at 2:30 p.m.